Are you too focused on the negative things in your life? Hi, my name is Samra Abuselbi. I'm the host of the show Super Awesome You on the Super Awesome Mix podcast network. You can find more of our shows where you listen to podcasts and more of our content at Super Awesome Mix on Instagram. If you haven't already, please take a moment and leave a 5-star review on the player that you listen to. And be sure to share it with friends and family who you think would enjoy the show. It helps reach even more people and make even more super awesome people out in the world. So that's good for all of us. This week, I want to focus on something that has been something I've been doing for over 10 years now. And this far into doing something, I can safely say it has really changed a lot in my life. And it's been one of the biggest, most beneficial changes I've made. It's a very simple little habit. Takes a little bit to get going, but once you start it, it's hard to ever really stop it, and it actually changes the way you view life and think about your days. So without further ado, let me tell you what I do. Every single morning, or sometimes at night, and don't need to be super rigid, but every single morning I start my day by quickly jotting down all the positive experiences I had from the day before. A positive experience can be as small as someone held the door for me when I wasn't expecting them to, and that caused me to smile or just feel a little moment of joy that I still believed in humanity doing kind things. It could be something really large, like I got a promotion at my job, or we hit a record number of listens this week. It could be something in between. It could be having a nice meal with a loved one or seeing a friend unexpectedly. There's so many different positive things that can happen in a day. The key thing here, what's happening here is by doing it the day after, so the morning after the day happened, you're actually training your mind to scan back a day. And more importantly, you're training your mind to scan back for positive experiences that happened that day. It is all too easy for us to focus on negative things that are happening in our lives. I'm sure you have a friend, or maybe you are the person who gets on the phone and immediately unloads all the, terrible, awful things that happened that day. And that's not to dismiss those things. Sometimes it does feel very helpful to vent or just get things off your chest or complain for a little bit. But it's really good to balance that out with all the potentially great things that happened that day, or at least all the good things, or all the, at the worst, neutral things that happened that day, too. By doing this, you really are training your brain to remember that your days are filled with other experiences as well. And you're training it away from that negative bias that we've talked a lot about. We do have a negative bias because negative information tended to keep us alive from an evolutionary standpoint. A negative piece of information, as we've talked about before, could be there's a tiger approaching. That is very bad, and I need to do something to keep myself alive because otherwise, that's it for me. Our brains today don't really know the difference between a tiger approaching about to maul us and us getting an upsetting email from our boss, or missing the train on the way to work, or there being way more traffic than you expected there to be Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. The evolutionary pathways that are being traveled in your brain, all the neurotransmitters that are, connecting the dots, so to speak, are the exact same pathways between the tiger and traffic. So your body really does feel a lot of stress, a lot of negativity. It doesn't feel good, but we have evolved well past that. And we have the ability to train our minds to kind of override some of our base biology and recognize that, hey, this is actually not that bad. And here's something good that came out of it. Or here's a bunch of other good things that happened this day. By doing this over a lot of time, so like I said, I've been doing this for over 10 years, you tend to think about your days as a balance of there were good things and there were bad things. Some days there's way more good than bad. Some days there's way more bad than good. But the point is that you are always remembering that your days are mixed up of both. It tends to make you far more open to opportunities. There's actually really interesting research that happened many years ago talking about how people who tend to be a little bit more positive mindset literally see more of their surroundings than those that tend to be a little bit more negative mindset. In one really interesting example that I go to all the time. It was referenced in the book, The Happiness Advantage. They took a bunch of people and handed them a newspaper, and the task was, we want you to count the number of pictures that there are in this newspaper. When you've arrived at an answer, just hand it back to the researcher and let them know the number. The key thing is that they split it between two groups. One group self-identified as people who felt lucky, felt positive. They were just generally optimistic, happy people. They, again, self-identified as that. The other group were people who self-identified as unlucky. Bad things only happened to them, and they were generally more pessimistic on life. So the pessimistic group, on average, took something like 7 to 10 minutes to count the number of pictures, and the numbers that they arrived at were, distributed like a little bit too low, a little bit too high, around like in the 30s or so. And it took them about 10 minutes. They also exhibited signs of like frustration as they were given this task to kind of go through it. Those in the lucky group, I think, finished it in under 10 seconds. I really think the median time was like 7 seconds. And you might think, well, my goodness, what the heck, right? And here's what's so amazing about this experiment. The headline of the newspaper was, there are exactly 37 photos in this newspaper. And then I believe the subtext underneath it was, just return this paper right now to the researcher, you're done. And so they read the headline and the subhead, and then immediately handed it right back to the researcher and was like, here you go, there's 37 photos. They've done research like this in a number of other different ways that kind of, again, prove the same thing over and over again. People who tend to be a little bit more positive mindset tend to literally see more in their surroundings than those that are more negative mindset. So what ends up happening is that positivity fuels more positive opportunities, and negativity tends to fuel more negative opportunities or lack of opportunities. I find that to be fascinating. And that is really why positivity journaling can start to change your life. Because when you are confronted with a negative experience, you can recognize it as a negative experience, but you can also start to look for the so-called way out. What else happened that day? What else, or what can you make of this negative experience? What other positive things surrounded this negative experience? What might be coming because of this negative experience that is positive? You retrain that brain, you lay down new pathways, and you get better and better at this as you go on. When I first started this, I can safely tell you it was a struggle. I could barely remember what had happened the day before. So even just my memory wasn't as strong in terms of like, wow, I spent, a whole 24 hours. I can barely recall what I had for dinner last night, much less what I did in the morning. But that got better through time. B, the first time I sat down, I really couldn't think of much that was positive. I was very much struggling, and I could only highlight like major things. And I ignored all these little minor things that gave me a little moment of joy or a smile or a laugh or, something positive like that. But through time, those two things got so much easier to do. And now I often run out of space in my journal. I use like a task planner basically. So every single day has a set amount of space. And I really do frequently run out of space on days of all the little happy things that happened the day before. The really nice outcome at the end of a year is that you've got an entire journal that is all positive experiences. So it's really nice sometimes to kind of flip back through and remember good things that have happened to you this year. It can be a really source of inspiration for your own personal growth, your own journey, and a reminder on really dark days that there are many, many days in your life that are not dark, that they are actually full of joy and love, and that there are many days ahead of you, I'm sure, that are going to be full of love and joy and happiness. This week's song of the week, to kind of sum all of this up, is the song by Macklemore featuring Kesha, and it's called Good Old Days. This is not necessarily the same vibe as some of the other motivational songs, but I do find this one really motivating because I love the idea that the good old days are happening whenever you want them to be happening. We often reflect long past of like, oh, those are the good old days, but we're not really living in the moment of those days until, much, much later when we're reflecting back. So it's really a nice reminder to take a look around, realize that you might have more than you think that you do. You likely do, even if it's something really small and something that you're just overlooking right now. There's always something to be grateful for. At the very least, that you're here and you're listening and you're looking for growth. I think those things are wonderful things to celebrate and to not take for granted. So, with that, I hope you go into this next week. Maybe you start this new habit and try it out and let me know how it goes and see where it takes you.